Hello, and you're very welcome to Kicking Match, a podcast all about the Irish League. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and I am back. Did you miss me? I did try to fill my little fortnight void with a tasty filler episode, but nothing satisfies quite like some prime cut, up-to-date league action reaction. We're even going to preview this weekend's slate of games. That's right, we're going to podcast like it's mid-September 2022, baby. We're also going to sample some Northern Ireland national team chat after another difficult week on and off the pitch for the AFA. Were fans really booing from the stands, or were they just getting into the Halloween spirit a tad bit early? It could have been some paranormal activity. Windsor is usually empty for most games. Perhaps it's haunted by the ghost of Linfield's European run. I've missed this. Back in the saddle once again after a 2-week layoff. A first big holiday in absolutely ages from me. I'm just back from Florida and I am jet lagged to the absolute back teeth. But of course, I was there and I was hit by the afters of a hurricane. I was very lucky, to be fair, in the end, to only be battered by the tropical storm version of Ian. Unfortunately, some were not so lucky out there in the States. But in the end, my experience of Hurricane Ian, Storm Ian, it was pretty much just like a Friday night at the Oval. Very, very wet, but I'm glad I brought my coat. So, from the most magical place on earth to the most magical league, well, in Northern Ireland, I guess. Neville action has been roaring along the track as I've been spending my time trying to get my head around the tipping system. So a lot to recap, and someone that's going to help me pick my way through it all is one of the best sports journalists in the country, a hot tech king. It has been alluded to by his former social club alum, Keith Bailey, and no matter what he tells you, what I believe is true. He is Mark McIntosh from The Sun.
Thanks very much, mate. You're buttering me up quite well there.
Oh, it's all a part of the game, all a part of it. I've got to say nice things. I've got to make a Boyzone / Ronan Keating reference, and then we're in, and I'm back after 2 weeks away. I've been following it all through Twitter and the various bits and pieces. It's kind of been a strange fortnight coming back after there was the whole suspension of the league the week beforehand. So I have been following what's been going on. Obviously, there was an international break in the middle of it, and we can probably crack in there, as your feed was one of the ones I was checking while I was away to see what was all going down as Northern Ireland played 2 games. We talked about it in the podcast before I left. Greece and Kosovo, once again, mixed fortunes is probably the best way to describe it. Going into it, I felt as though Baraclough, it was win or bust. He got that win. It wasn't in the most convincing of circumstances. There's been lots of talk since then, paper talk about his future, where the current setting of the team is. There's also a bit of controversy, which we'll get into. But as a fan, Mark, are you in any way more satisfied with Baraclough? And what do you make of the current talk that he's being backed potentially by his employers?
On that, first of all, it doesn't surprise me that the IFA are backing their man. And there's maybe a couple of reasons for that. The IFA have never really been an association that sacks managers. And part of the chat when he got the job and when he got the extension, it was about bleeding younger players into the squad. Some of those players he would have known from his time in charge of the 21s. And it was to try and qualify for a major tournament. Now, we all know the Euros is Northern Ireland's best chance of doing that. So I couldn't really see them sacking Ian before the Euro qualifiers. Now, had we lost both the games in the last window, that could possibly have changed things. But the other side of that is the Irish FA appointed Ian when probably most fans were looking at maybe Tommy Wright or Stephen Robinson or Jim Magilton. Kenny Shields was also interviewed. And I think the IFA would have to admit they got it wrong. And the IFA aren't the best organisation on this planet at admitting when they get things wrong. So for that reason as well, I just don't think there was any chance they were going to sack him.
You say that, I'm trying to think of a time that they did admit they've been wrong. I was reading.
I don't know if we were alive.
I was reading through stuff by Stephen Beacom in the Bell Tell, and there was talk of he was reflecting on what his personal thoughts were on Baraclough. I've been looking through the results of Baraclough. He's sitting here with just the 6 wins out of 28. Some of them have come, the Lithuania results are there. They were probably the strongest results of the lot. But we are looking down the barrel of the Euro 2024 group stage being delivered this Sunday. We are now in pot 5. We have ultimately, regardless of if it's completely in the hands of Baraclough or not, this is a team who has regressed. It was probably always going to happen with the age of the players that got us to 16 and beyond. But going into this campaign, what does Baraclough have to do? What's his aim to make sure he gets a second contract here, or a new one at least?
I think the simple fact is, for Ian to get a new contract after the Euros, I think he would have to qualify for the Euros. I don't think anything else would do. And look, we're in pot 5, as you said, which makes it as difficult as it can be. Now, the IFA will point to the fact that the last time we were in pot 5 for a Euro draw, we ended up topping the group and going to France. Let's all be honest, though, that seems a million years ago.
It does.
I don't think we have a similar squad. I feel sorry for Ian Baraclough as well, though, because from the moment he took over, he's had a tough hand dealt to him. He took the job and he had the playoff games straight away to qualify for the last Euros, and that's difficult for any manager to come in to try and do that. Since then, he's had COVID to contend with and all of the hoops that had to jump through that. He had players not available at times, and that happens with international managers, and they all have to deal with that. But I think there have been so many things thrown his way. You look at the summer then, and he had so many players unavailable, which certainly wasn't helpful to anyone, and we saw that in the results. And then you come to the latest 2 games, and you had the whole circus surrounding the incidents with Kyle Lafferty and Conor McMenamin. And again, I don't think that was particularly well handled by the Irish FA, because in my view, the president or the chief executive should have been there taking our questions, not the manager. He was trying to prepare for 2 games, which weren't just vital for Northern Ireland as a football team, but they were absolutely huge for Ian Baraclough as the manager as well. And I think they could have taken a little bit of that pressure off him. So I don't think he's been helped in many regards. But the simple fact is, look, you read out his record there. It's not good enough. I don't think any Northern Ireland fan expects us to be top in groups constantly. It's unrealistic. We're not good enough to do that. But when I look at our squad, I certainly think we are better than our results have shown. Looking
at his record, it's difficult. It's somewhat close to Nigel Worthington, which sounds a lot better than maybe the feeling definitely is there. Baraclough's currently sitting on 28 games. Worthington ended up having 41. He only got the 9 wins. It's somewhat close, and again, this is probably why we have this ill feeling within the fans. We saw them turn on him, in particular at that game at Windsor. It's closer to Sammy McIlroy. He had 29, and that was really the down days of this team. He had 29 games. He only got the 5 wins. He's on a... It is a per record, whatever way you shake it. And some of the big defenders for Baraclough has said exactly what you said. The position he's been in, being given this project of, it was project continuity, wasn't it? It was bringing up these young players and trying to bed them into the team. I do not think you can sit there and say that has been successful, particularly with Kyle Lafferty being the man that at least was up there trying to get you goals. It hasn't been fully committal to Project Youth. And now he does go into this, well, the draw at least for Euro 2024. He's got his contract, will take him to the end of this qualifying campaign. It feels as though the IFA are just going to roll with it and just say, we're on this road anyway, we're going to go for it. Does that kind of say that this campaign is, I don't know many Northern Ireland fans that are feeling positive going into it. And when you're looking at the absolute twilight now of the Northern Ireland careers of Evans, Davis, Cathcart, Lafferty, McGinn, we're sitting here with no striker. Now feels like if we do not feel it's moving forward, is this not the time to rip it off and start before we see some of these really talented players that are emerging be 2 years older than they are now.
Listen, I think there was definitely an argument for that, but I think that argument was maybe after the June games, because to me, that was, as we thought, rock bottom. Yes, there were mitigating circumstances, but surely if they were going to pull the trigger, that would be the time, because then you give another manager the 2 games that we've just had. Because again, I spoke earlier there about Ian Baraclough, his first couple of games were the playoff games to try and qualify for the last Euros. If they were to bring another manager in now, his first game will be the first Euro qualifier. And I think that's difficult as well, because at the moment there are no plans in place for friendlies in November. I know the Republic announced a couple of games, but it doesn't look like the IFA are at this moment in time. But you're right. I think any Northern Ireland fan I've spoken to, no one believes for a second that we're going to qualify for the Euros. Like, not a single person I've spoken to. I've spoken to a lot of players, and players are always going to say what they have to say, and they'll say the right things. They believe they can turn things around. They believe that they are better than the results have shown. And look, there's an argument for that. I think a lot of it will depend on luck with the draw. The last time we qualified, we were kind of fortunate. There were some favourable teams in there. But then you look at the next qualifying draw we had, we had the Netherlands and Germany. That could just as easily happen. And the fact that we're in pot 5 automatically makes it more difficult. Listen, I don't have major hopes. And, you mentioned a couple of players' names there who maybe coming to the twilight of their careers. I wouldn't be surprised if every one of those players you just named decide enough's enough. It might be the right time, and everyone will look at Stephen Davis. Yeah. And Stephen has already said that he's, he will look at things again. He's done that every year for the last couple of years, to be totally fair to him. This isn't a massive break-in story as such. But I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen the end of Davo already. It feels like it might be the right time for him. And after 140 caps, look, he owes Northern Ireland absolutely nothing. He's been an absolute legend and a hero, and he deserves all the plaudits he gets. And I would say the same, like Johnny Evans, he's reached that 100 caps, and from speaking to Johnny down the years, it was always a massive target for him. He really wanted to get 100 caps. He's done that now. Leicester are going through a tough time. He's club captain. Maybe he would see this as a time just to say, right, I need to fully focus on what I'm doing with my club. And again, he owes us nothing. And if we went into the Euro qualifiers without Davo, it would be difficult enough. But without Davo and possibly Johnny, which slightly lesser degree if that was going to happen. But even without Davo, I think we would really struggle.
It's more just that central figure, that experience. It's all good to say, blow it up, take it down, throw the players in there and make it work. But you take Davis out of that team and you just feel you lose a lot of guile, you lose a lot of forward momentum, and just someone that these players can look to and say, don't worry boys, or push up forward here, or just some sort of rod to keep everything all together. And you're absolutely right, mentioning the draw, it could go either way, and usually it does kind of fall in the middle. There is a scenario where you've got Hungary, Finland, Romania, Faroes and Andorra, and you're thinking, let the revolution begin. It's every game's a real chance to get points and move up. On the other hand, you could be sitting here looking down the barrel of Spain, France, Norway and Turkey. And you just go, well, maybe we can beat San Marino home and away. So it's tough. And this feels like it's all somewhat of a pile on Ian Baraclough, and it does feel tough. But I have to ask, in your opinion, continuing with him for this campaign, as it's being said they are, is this a footballing decision? Or, as it's been alluded to by some people, is this a financial decision? Maybe it's both.
I think the only decision to get rid of Ian Baraclough now would be a footballing decision. And that's what it should be. I think there are many reasons why the IFA won't necessarily want to sack Ian Baraclough, and part of that is financial. And like I said earlier, the Self-Preservation Society within the IFA, there's no way they're going to want to admit their mistakes for appointing him and giving him another contract. I think there are arguments for and against Ian Baraclough. The fact that he was given the extension, you probably should let him see out, the duration of that, and that means this Euro campaign. And listen, if we're all being honest, yes, our players are better than what they're showing at the moment. There's no doubt about that. But just by changing the manager, it doesn't magically change everything. I don't necessarily think that we would vastly improve. And people look back to the end of the Nigel Worthington era, and that was tough to watch. But remember, Michael O'Neill didn't come in and just flick a switch. It took 2 years. So I don't necessarily believe that changing the manager fixes everything. But it's very difficult to look at things in the cold light of day and say it's right to move ahead with Ian Baraclough. And look, anyone who has dealt with Ian Baraclough will tell you he's one of the most decent fellas you'll ever meet. I desperately, desperately wanted to work for Ian Baraclough. But the sad reality is, in the past, certainly 18 months, I haven't seen much that tells me that things are going to change, because I don't really know what we are. I don't know what our identity is. I don't know how we're trying to play. Things get changed up. Sometimes fans talk about substitutions are very strange at times. I just think there's so much going on that he has so much to fix. I think every fan would probably say now's the right time, but I genuinely don't believe that the IFA are very much thinking now, right, we need to start thinking about a replacement here. I don't think it's on their radar. And as the IFA have shown in the past, fan dissent doesn't normally mean that they change things. So I don't see this as the IFA must decide now because the fans have been singing we want Barra out. I just don't think the IFA think like that. Personally, I can't really argue that things will get better, because like I've just said, when you add in the fact that Davo could possibly be gone, things will get tough. And if he doesn't start the campaign well, the atmosphere at Windsor Park will not be pretty. And I don't think anyone wants to see that. So maybe for his own sake, maybe it would be the time to let him go.
I think you've really nailed on the set that I've been hearing and getting, that it's not just the results. It's what is the system, what is the philosophy that we're working towards. And we are now in a fork in the road with Northern Ireland and now in Baraclough's reign, where how does he approach this? Does he approach it that it's about just getting the best 11 players on the pitch and just trying to take every game and win it and just roll the dice how and whatever way you have to? Or does he just go for it and say, I've got 2 years, I've got my backing from the IFA, and it's time just to go with Brown, Bradley, Lane, Shea Charles, Lavery, White, and whatever the score is, it doesn't matter, because we just need to blood these players, and if it doesn't work, that's fine, but I'm going to be out here anyway. That's how pragmatic he is, and perhaps maybe a philosophy that's clear to the fans could be his saviour, but we'll just have to see. And just on that, I wonder, is one of the things that's keeping it together for the IFA with sticking with Baraclough, is it because there isn't a clear successor? It's a question that I've been asking a few other people in your position of, well, if it isn't Baraclough, who is it then? And there's none where you go, that person's the one.
Yeah, I think that all plays a part in it. Tommy Wright's out of work. He applied for it the last time, so I'm sure it's a job that Tommy has always wanted. People will look at Grant McCann, but again, Grant's back at a club that means a lot to him at Peterborough. He's building something there again. Does he want to throw that away for what will be a difficult job for a couple of years? I don't see that. And David Healy, again, yes, David Healy will manage Northern Ireland. I have no doubt about that. I don't think that happens anytime in the next 5 years, if I'm being really honest. I think David will want to test himself somewhere other than Linfield before he would make that jump to the international job. So there isn't people who jump out. Again, look at Stephen Robinson, who was interviewed the last time. He's got St Mirren flying. They're up. They were third in the SPFL. He's building something there. He's rebuilding his reputation as well. I don't think people will be falling over themselves the way they normally would to go for this job if it became available tomorrow.
And what makes it, I think, makes it more difficult in the eyes of some Northern Ireland fans is that it looks as though Stephen Kenny's somewhat getting it together for the Republic. But then some will say he was under as much fire and maybe it could all be turned around. And I think no matter what, as a Northern Ireland fan, you want the team to do well, no matter who's looking after it in charge. It's about the team that you're looking after. But shift gears and move towards a story that I've very much been a distant observer of, and a story that you've been really close to, and it is regarding Conor McMenamin and Kyle Lafferty. For people that don't know, can you really set out what the controversy was and what the timeline was from the videos surfacing and then the timeline that it was all played out?
Yeah, so the first incident is Kyle Lafferty, so we'll take that one first. The squad normally meets up on a Sunday and a Monday, depending on when players play over the weekend. And on the Tuesday night, Ian Baraclough took the players out to a restaurant for team bonding and just to get all the lads together, not necessarily talking about football, just getting together. And after that, a few of the lads were able to go out. Now, I think you can absolutely question whether that's a good idea on a Tuesday night ahead of a Saturday game. Personally, that blew my mind that was allowed to happen, but that's neither here nor there. On that night, it's certainly been told to us that it was that night this incident happened. Kyle Lafferty was approached by somebody in what looked like a nightclub. Someone asked for a photograph, and someone, instead of taking a picture, decided to video what was going on. And Kyle was posing for a photograph with a guy who then said, "Up the Celts," as Kyle was posing for the photograph. And Kyle replied with, listen, a lot of people will say we know exactly what he said. I can't categorically say I know what he said, but since then he has said he regrets what happened. And I think what people have said and what Kilmarnock said was that he is supposed to have said something of a sectarian nature. Look, obviously, no one wants to hear that. I will say, look, listen, we grew up in Northern Ireland and we can have that sort of banter with mates. You can, of course you can. It's that sort of dark humor that gets us through a lot of things. But when you're saying it to an absolute stranger, it doesn't wash. That's what happened to Kyle. It was widely spread probably on the Wednesday and the Thursday. The Irish FA decided to say nothing until Kilmarnock released a statement. Kilmarnock released their statement, I think it was the Thursday morning. And then the IFA still say nothing. I was certainly getting phone calls to say that Kyle Lafferty would leave the team hotel and go back to Scotland on the Thursday. I spoke to the IFA about it. I tried to speak to Ian Baraclough about it. Nobody wanted to talk. We got wind that there was possibly a statement coming out on the Thursday night. That didn't arrive, which just led to more questions. The Irish FA then put a statement out on the Friday morning, which mentioned a back injury that Kyle also had. And that is true. Kyle's been struggling with a back injury since the start of the season. I've spoken to him about that at length since the start of the season. So I knew that was true, but they kind of muddied the waters a little bit. I asked the question during the press conference on the Friday afternoon, why is Kyle Lafferty out of the squad? Is it the back injury? Is it the incident? And there wasn't a particularly straight answer. And the statement and the press conference, which I'm sure a lot of people saw on TV, it wasn't pretty. No one enjoyed being in that room, but questions needed to be asked and needed to be answered. And those questions weren't really answered. So at that stage, then we knew Kyle was out of the squad. Lo and behold, on the day of the game, a historical social media post of a video of Conor McMenamin then did the rounds again. And look, this is a video that when the incident happened, again, he is alleged to have been, a pro-IRA slogan in a chant. And look, this video did the rounds at the time. It did the rounds when he re-signed for Glentoran. It did the rounds again when he was called into the international squad for the first time in June. The only people who seemed surprised that this video actually existed was the Irish FA, which blows my mind. But on the Saturday morning, then Ian Baraclough told Conor McMenamin, in the light of the Kyle Lafferty incident, the fact that they'd sent him home, that they were going to have to pull Conor McMenamin from the squad that day. They would further investigate it. They weren't ruling them out of both games, but they said they would further investigate it. And the official Irish FA statement arrived to me 47 minutes before kickoff, before the Kosovo game, to say that Conor McMenamin was out. Again, look, from start to finish, the entire thing was a shambles. And even after that, then to take it a step further, I'd got wind on the Sunday that Conor McMenamin was definitely going to be on the flight going to Greece. Now, at that stage, I think a lot of people had assumed, like Kyle Lafferty, he would be out of both games. I put a couple of tweets out, I put a story out, and then the Irish FA confirmed that Conor McMenamin was indeed on that flight. Now, again, nothing's ever straightforward with the Irish FA. So they put Conor McMenamin in a position where they took him to Greece, but told him there would be a disciplinary committee meeting on the Monday to decide whether he was able to be involved in that game, because they wanted to decide whether the Irish FA were going to take any retrospective action against Conor. Now, to me, this is a conversation that could easily have taken place on the Saturday. Ask Conor what the video was, when it was, and what punishment he received at the time. I don't know whether those questions were asked or answered, but it seems strange that they had to wait till the Monday to get those answered. And Conor was punished by his club at the time. And again, I tweeted a thing on the Monday. Basically, the Irish FA, within their rules, there's no statute of limitations on a lot of these things, so they can punish somebody for something they did 10 years ago. But FIFA statutes, of the FIFA disciplinary code, supersedes the Irish FA one. And for what Conor did, there's a 5-year limitation. So it was very clear to me then at that stage that the Irish FA couldn't punish Conor. So eventually, on the Monday afternoon, it was probably Monday tea time, the Irish FA released a statement to say Conor McMenamin can play. Basically, from the Tuesday night until that Monday night, it was an absolute shambles from the Irish FA. And the only thing that went right was the victory over Kosovo.
When it comes to this stuff, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, but this is somewhat being taken out of Baraclough's hands. And it's just another distraction for him looking after the team. It's the IFA who's looking after this, and this is becoming the situation for both players and his other players locally. That he's been caught up in similar things where, you know, with social media, messengers, these things are being brought up, they're being shared, and I think we are approaching these questions, and they're tough questions where, as fans, as organisations, and as players, we have to now approach. And there's never going to be a cold hard decision one way or the other, what's fine, what's not. But it's, what do we do about this? What do we do about historic videos, about these topics, and how we handle it? I think one of the key things of this story is just the flip-flopping and the lack of communication, and the intent of this was the IFA trying to see a face in front of fans. And when it came to the public, and I know we can get caught up in what we see on Twitter and online, and think sometimes these little strange echo chambers we can go into is what everybody thinks. But broadly, what do you feel the reaction was online from fans? Were they calling for this action to be taken, or was it just a small section?
Look, I think there was a bit of a split. And if you look at any social media, especially Twitter, you're going to get people who say, oh, come on, you know, this isn't something that we've all haven't done in some guys during our lives. Or, you know, if this was 7 years ago, my goodness, you could go back through anything and find something if you really want to be offended by something. So there were people saying that. Of course, there were people who were saying, and they're perfectly entitled to the opinion to say, no, what was said just simply cannot be said. It's a disgrace. Shouldn't be anywhere near the team. They're entitled to that opinion also. There were people point scoring as well, of course. You know, the very fact that people couldn't wait to put out the Conor McMenamin video again. You know, like I said, this wasn't a new thing. And it's a difficult one. And to be totally fair to the Irish FA, which that's not an easy thing to say, because the Irish FA do a lot of things wrong. They won't admit that. But one thing they tried to do, certainly with the Kyle Lafferty incident, with that statement, when they confused things by talking about his back injury, I think that was them throwing Kyle a bit of a bone. You know, the statement from Kilmarnock was quite harsh, and it left Kyle in a very difficult situation. The Irish FA will feel it left them in a difficult situation. I do believe they threw him a bit of a bone. But when you looked online, look, you can get any opinion you want from social media. There were a lot of people agreeing with what they did. There was a lot of people saying it was an overreaction. There was a lot of people probably who didn't care. I don't think there's a right way of doing it. For me now, though, and it's something we spoke to Ian Baraclough about. I would love to speak to the chief executive of the president, but they haven't made themselves available to any of us as yet. But surely the only way that we can stop this situation again would be some form of an amnesty. You know, you set the players down at all age groups and you say, right, some of you may have done something you're not proud of in the past. Now, depending on how serious it is, if it's something illegal, that's obviously very different. But in terms of what these two lads were accused of doing, I think the only thing you can do now is say, right, if anyone has done that, this is your amnesty. From this moment on, this is where we stand on this. And if anything happens from this moment on, it doesn't matter who you are, then you're out. If that's what they're going to do, it should be across the board. And an amnesty is maybe the only way of doing it. And I know a couple of people have mentioned maybe players having to sign up to a code of conduct in the future. Maybe that's something which will happen. And I think, again, to be fair to Ian Baraclough, he said that maybe he has to look at things again in terms of, is it a good idea to bring the players out on the Tuesday night? Is it a good idea to let them go out on that night? You know, there are things that everyone can look at. But unfortunately, in this country, there probably will be things in some people's past. Speaking to one player, an Irish League player recently, somebody had posted something historical from him and he didn't even remember posting the thing. And if we're going to judge someone in their mid to late 20s now on something they did when they were 16 or 17, I don't know what sort of society we're living in, because that's crazy. I know when I was 16 or 17, who knows what I get up to? I don't remember. And I think players are exactly the same. Yes, they're very talented footballers. That's why they're playing at that level. But we were all the same as kids. You know, we can't be held accountable for something we did as kids now. I just don't think that's right. The Kyle Lafferty one's slightly different because it was fresh. It was that week. And, you know, since then, Kyle Lafferty, he was fined by his club and he's going to go through an educational program. And that's probably the right way to deal with it.
It's a generational thing now. It's coming more clear where you do have these people who had social media when they're young, they're now older, and all that stuff's online. I'm sure we could all find stuff. I'm sure you can find a tweet where I say The Crow was my favorite movie. There's plenty of things we regret. But in seriousness, though, there's two different sides of this. There's the Kyle Lafferty thing, which is more recent. You have the McMenamin thing, which is historic. They're on kind of both sides of the coin. Obviously, it's a case-by-case thing. But if there's remorse, I think that's a key factor. Conor McMenamin's come out and he has apologised. Either again or he's apologised for what happened. There was something historical, and even if it isn't historical, and this is not just about things that could be considered sectarian. There could be comments regarding race, gender, whatever, various different things, and it could be on very different levels of severity. And I think this is something we will have to discuss moving forward. It's also the reality of potentially the people that you're supporting on the pitch are not, in the eyes of the world, most perfect, the most clean record. I think it's also a wider conversation of now how for young people they feel so much stress now because you just have to be absolutely perfect. You cannot have been drunk and said something wrong, upset somebody, not live this kind of clean life. And I think there is somewhat, if there's remorse, that it depends on the topic. I think there's a push for forgive and move on. It's hard not to argue that the massive story around John Heron in particular did have an impact on the decisions being made by the IFA.
Look, when I look back on the John Heron incident, I wrote about it at the time. I mentioned it to people within the Irish FA at the time. They opened a can of worms that was going to be very difficult to close. You know, they decided to take action and give John a 10-game ban while Larne were still investigating the whole situation. I don't think there was a need for them to jump in at that time. And I think once they did that, then it's open season. And, you know, when I tweeted at the time about Conor McMenamin, the last line of my tweet was, where does this end? And I think we're sitting now, you know, a week or so after the international games. I still don't know where it ends. I don't think anyone does. And I think for that reason, like I mentioned, some sort of an amnesty, it's possibly the only way we can put an end to this. Players will certainly know now that if they do anything, it's going to be highlighted. You know, and I wouldn't even necessarily say the media, it's social media. That's where it is. It's everywhere on social media. And the media rightly jump onto these stories because they are stories, whether we like the stories or not. You know, I certainly didn't enjoy writing about John Heron. I certainly didn't enjoy writing about Kyle Lafferty or Conor McMenamin. And hopefully I don't have to write any of those stories ever again. My fear is this won't be the last time.
It's not just an exclusive thing to football. It reminds me of the story coming out of that concert in West Belfast, that the young woman who was suspended from her work at the car dealership. This is, and maybe we're very aware of how that can impact us just because from our roles in the media, but it's something we will deal with. And I think as a society, we are learning to figure out what the rules are and how we can move on from previous mistakes. We jump into the league and all these games that I've missed. I'll not ask you to give me feedback on whatever it was, 2 to 3 game weeks of fixtures, but we can look back at this week's, and we'll start with a game. I just came out of storm, Hurricane Ian, while I was there getting blown about. Seemingly there was an even bigger washout in East Belfast on Friday night, where the game between Ballymena and Glentoran was called off due to the weather, the rain, just a really not a great state the pitch at the Oval was. There's no point getting into should the game be played on. But there's 2 teams there in Glentoran and Ballymena with unique stories that have cropped up while I was away. First with Glentoran, they were sitting top of the league. They've got a real win streak at the minute now. They were looking pretty there after that draw. With Lauren to start the season, they've just been winning. They've been rising to every task. But one story I saw there from their manager was talking about the want for Irish League games to be suspended for the international break. That's a throwaway comment, surely, no?
No, I was actually part of that huddle after the Glentoran Coleraine game. Mick McDermott spoke about it and said that clubs were asked for feedback in terms of whether the Irish League should shut down for the World Cup the way other leagues are doing. Now, I don't think anyone could say that we should shut down completely. I think what Mick McDermott was saying was, would there have been a chance to shut it down for the group games? Because obviously there are a lot more games. There's maybe 3 different time slots each day where people will be watching the World Cup. Even people who aren't that interested end up watching the World Cup. It's just what we do. And I think he also suggested, could they have looked at this earlier and said, let's pencil in some cup games for that time instead of earlier in the season, instead of league games. And look, to be fair to Mick, he's a bit of a Marmite character. He divides opinion constantly, and every time he offers an opinion, people jump on it. I actually think what he was saying that time makes a lot of sense. I think there could have been a way of doing that. It's obviously much too late now to do that, but no, I don't think anyone could have argued that the league should shut down for the World Cup. Possibly for the group stages. I can see the logic in that.
People are going to be flooding out to watch Denmark-Tunisia instead of Coleraine-Dungannon Swifts, but I guess he's thinking of that when he has an international player in his squad with McMenamin there. But with the amount of teams they're going to have to crawl back now, they're going to be playing as many games thick and fast. The other side of that coin there was Ballymena. They lost twice in the time that I've been away. First to Carrick, really difficult loss there, and then a 3-0 beating by Crusaders. The Carrick game's significant, mainly because it was a real blow in what's been a season of quite significant blows to Ballymena, even though it's been quite early. But it emerged that David Jeffrey, their manager, had offered his resignation to the board. Now, the board eventually rejected that and have convinced him and rallied around him, saying, "You are our man." What do you make of that? Do you feel that was a "I need your backing" board from David Jeffrey, or was it a solemn just David Jeffrey at his lowest point so far as Ballymena manager?
I think it was probably a bit of both. I think David wanted a reassurance that they did see him as the right man to take them forward. They do believe that he is the guy that can turn this for them. And look at David Jeffrey's record in the Irish League. If anyone is up to this sort of challenge, it's David Jeffrey.
Big time.
He's had many challenges in his time. Even when things were going well at Linfield, he had challenges within the club as well. So I've no doubt that David wants that challenge and he wants to fight. But there's no getting away from the fact it's an awful run of results for Ballymena. And when you look at the players they brought to the club in the summer, they should not be in this position. I think David believes he can turn things around. Otherwise, he wouldn't put himself in that position. But results aren't good enough. And in many, many ways, it was a 5 or 6 game losing streak going into the game against Glentoran. The weather's probably helped Ballymena because, I think the game only lasted 16 minutes, and in that stage, Conor McMenamin could have had a hat-trick. The game was probably only going to go one way, and that's maybe saved Ballymena on that occasion, but they have to turn things around and do it very quickly because, you look at the league table, it's not looking pretty for them. Now, I don't think anyone expects Ballymena to be challenging for a title. They certainly would have looked at this season as maybe a time to try and push into the top 6. That would have been success in terms of, even getting a cup run like they had last year. I think losing a player like Leroy Miller, who wasn't just a very good player for them, one of their best. He was the club captain. He was the local boy, the local hero. I think that's had a big impact on them. I think last season's Irish Cup final, and, we can all say, yes, it was May, it was months ago, but that had a massive impact on David Jeffrey. I witnessed it that day myself. And I'm sure it's had a massive impact on the players. And it seems to be there's been that little bit of a hangover from that. And look, I haven't watched them a lot this season, but what I have seen doesn't inspire me. I think it could be a long, hard season. But only talking from experience, if there's one man who can get them out of this, it's David Jeffrey. And pretty much like we were talking about the international team, just by changing the manager doesn't necessarily say things are going to instantly turn around or you're going to get that new manager bounce. I would definitely stick with David Jeffrey. He knows the players. He knows the character of the players. And we all know David Jeffrey's character. So for me, the board were right to say, no, absolutely not. We believe in you. We believe in the group of players you've got. But I am sure that David Jeffrey also needed to hear that.
More than anything, I feel like this is a project which he had during the summer. It hasn't worked out. And I was one of the people that was saying, I think they have a chance to comfortably in the top 6 and just bully the teams below them and shock a few of the other teams above them. That clearly hasn't happened. And I think I really didn't factor in what a massive impact the loss of Miller and Winchester would be to that team. And I think ultimately their centre belly there, particularly centre midfield, is just where they're losing these battles. And after that dramatic game with Glenavon in the first game of the season, they just haven't found the rhythm at all. And they're sitting really low on the table. And I must say, I think that they could be dragged into that if results aren't. They already somewhat are, but the form table says 5 losses in a row.
Yeah.
And those players as well that were in there were not signed to battle. And I'm not saying they're going to down tools or anything, but when you get into that rhythm of losing, it just makes it difficult. And I think you have some of these teams like Dungannon and Newry and Portadown, and I think you're seeing a lot with Carrick this season that, not that I think 3 or 4 of those teams have really shown it consistently, but they know what they're in for and they're fighting. I don't think Ballymena knows that they're in for potentially a relegation scrap. So we'll see how it goes. And like two wins and who knows what the start of the season. But I think they could be in trouble if in the next 3 games they're not getting at least 3-4 points out of that.
I think the biggest plus point for Ballymena so far this season is the fact that Portadown and Dungannon, their results have been as poor as they are. I don't see Ballymena in a relegation scrap. I don't think it will come to that. They're definitely going to have to improve. No doubt about that whatsoever. But I do think there's at least 2 clubs that will definitely be worse off than Ballymena throughout this season.
And one thing they're not lacking, albeit they haven't shown it so far, I kind of describe them as a glass cannon, and they have that firepower with McDade and McElroy, and Parkhouse doesn't seem to be starting. Like, he's not starting. Not that he doesn't seem to be. He isn't starting at the minute. The Ballymena fans know more than me, but I don't know what's really happening there. But at least they have the goals. I think you look at those other teams, I don't think they do. And a quick word for Glentoran. The game was rained off. If it wasn't rained off when they got a win, they would still be at the top of the table. A really impressive start of the season. Before the break, I really thought that Coleraine game was going to be a massive test. If they could see that out, no matter what the score was, and particularly get a clean sheet, which they did, that was a statement of saying we're strong, we're determined, and we're able to rise to the challenge.
Massively. Glentoran deserve all the credit in the world for what they've done so far this season. What I liked about them in the summer, they didn't go for the big marquee sign and spend the $100,000 on someone. They didn't do that. I think they've learned from many, many mistakes last season. They signed the right type of characters. They've signed good players, Aidan Wilson and James Singleton, super signings, I think. I worried about Glentoran's midfield last season. I think they've kind of got that sorted. Terry Devlin, another fantastic signing. And if you look so far in the league, they've conceded 1 goal. No one can argue with that. It's incredible.
It really, really is. Now, it's only 6 games, but that does blow you away. And it was a bit of a sucker punch from Crusaders game. And I think McMenamin is just such a weapon. It reminds me of the Crusaders title wins. He's almost playing this Heatley role where you just need to double up on him, and that then creates space elsewhere for other players. And yes, I think this summer was about getting boring for Glentoran, and it's really working for them. And it's even better when Linfield is sitting there on only 12 points. It's still early days, but to have that little gap just makes it a bit tasty as it moves forward. And Hangover probably feels over the top slightly, but Linfield are still getting themselves going after that horrible European exit for them. They did get a win against Dungannon Swifts over the weekend, 1-0. Look, the red card, it's an awful decision, but I think when I first saw the video from one angle, I was like, okay, red card. And sometimes you have to play the what do you think first look game. And I was like, okay, red card. I think that's going to happen. I wouldn't get too critical over that. But it's not great when you see the other angle from, let's say, the main stand end, really, is it? And I'm talking about, of course, the Reece Campbell goes through and Chris Johns is being seen to have tripped. Red card.
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one for the referee. From the original footage that I think everyone witnessed on Saturday, you can't categorically say one way or another. I think maybe the response of the players tells you a story instantly that there was no contact. You can't always trust players' responses, of course, and any referee will tell you that. I will say it's clearly a very honest mistake from Tony Clark, the referee.
I think so.
I don't think he was helped by his assistants in any shape or form. That said, where I would be critical of Tony, I don't see why it's a red card when I do think there was at least one defender covering. It's not denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity.
I would also agree.
So, not every foul outside the box like that when the goalkeeper rushes out is a red card. I think the Linfield player could have got to it first. So I don't think it was a red card, even if there had been contact. But certainly, if anyone saw the footage, Linfield's footage of it, there's an angle from a GoPro camera behind or in the net, and you can clearly see daylight between Reece Campbell and Chris Johns. So there obviously was no contact whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And Linfield, just the one goal, that's all they needed. They're still trotting out that one-off Latvia kit. Boring chat, but are we expecting another? We finally got another kit, a rather plain blue kit. That's fine. Are we expecting a little dazzling away kit released, I don't know, in March next year? Or
I have to say, I actually really like Linfield's new home kit.
It's fine. I just thought the one they had was pretty good as well.
I certainly prefer the old retro look of the 1980 Irish Cup final, the year I was born. So I do like that one. I've certainly been told off the record what the away kit is. Yeah, I would expect to see that soon-ish. But, I think a lot of Irish League clubs over the summer have had problems getting their kits in time. Certainly their replica kits. The summer months are always the big months to sell those. I think a lot of clubs have missed out this year. But look, I could talk about kits all day because I'm a kit geek. What I will say about Linfield, it's a difficult season for them so far in that, yes, they've had the European run. They've had all of that disappointment. And I think any Irish League fan could probably identify, as much as Linfield, you're either a lover of Linfield or you just cannot have them at all. I think a lot of people could identify with that hurt. It was a cruel, cruel blow. But they've missed out in league games because of that. They've missed out in league games because of international call-ups. They've missed out in league games because of the SPFL Trust Cup. And they've just been drawn away to Kelty Hearts in the next round of that. So that's another away trip, and they won't be able to play a league game that weekend. So when you're playing catch-up, it's difficult. And if you look at Glentoran or Larne or whoever, getting points on the board means a lot. And Linfield will have to play catch-up. I've no doubt they're capable of doing that, but they're coming at it from a more difficult position than they would normally be used to.
Yeah, I think so as well. The Carrick result wasn't great. Crusaders won. We'll give or take. I think they could have done better. Somewhat Architects of their own downfall there. We'll get to that game. And look, they still won that game in that Scottish Cup. They're through. They haven't played at home since that Portadown game, I don't know, 3 years ago. And they are getting over the hangover. I think they're at the Chinese at 5 p.m. They're better. They've got out of bed. That's okay. But they're still a bit queasy, and don't open the shades too quickly, and let's not shake them. They've still got a bit of work to do, but plenty of talent in that team, and I think confidence is going to be key, because a lot of other teams have that, and a team that showed how much confidence they have was Cliftonville at Solitude, blowing Newry away. One of the signings of the year, Mr. Hale with a hat-trick. When they are on fire, Cliftonville are one of the most exciting and thrilling forward attacking teams in this league.
Yeah, they're certainly one of the most exciting teams to watch. What I like about Cliftonville is that they can win by playing lovely football. They can win by explosive finishes. They can win by grinding it out and doing the dirty stuff and the ugly stuff. And they've got a bit of everything. I think, you look at Ronan Hale coming in, and Ronan was a super signing. It's the club he wanted to be at, hence he turned Linfield down in previous windows. He wanted to be at Cliftonville. But I think also this season, it now looks like his brother Rory is fit and raring to go. He's had a tough time with injuries in the past probably 8 or 9 months. And when you have a central midfielder of his ability scoring a hat-trick, that's what you want to see. If you're doing that, and you know the firepower you've also got with your attackers, Cliftonville are certainly no one-season wonder. They are the real deal. They will be pushing Glentoran, Linfield, whoever else, Larne. They will be pushing. And I was there the first day of the season when they played Coleraine, and it was the worst Cliftonville performance I've seen in years. It felt like a one-off, and they've won every league game since then, and that tells you its own story.
It really does. I'd somewhat pinned them down as having a shaky start to the season, but here we are, 7 games in. After that tough game against Coleraine, they haven't looked back. Yes, they've been shaky in conceding some goals and having to push forward and get the goals to win, but they're able to blow Newry away. They were able to get that 1-0 win away to Glenavon, and it is taking it game by game, 5 wins in a row. And right now, it looks like they're back to where they were last season, and joining them up near the top is another team that just looks to be consistent and somewhat doing it in a boring fashion, Larne. They're just chipping away. They're still undefeated. Really impressive win against Coleraine at home, 2-0. Miller, Clear being a real core to this team at the minute. And Paul O'Neill's been a smashing signing. I'm looking forward to them taking on another big test, because they just seem to be a lot more drama-less and just taking these teams down with efficiency. It was only a 1-0 win against Portadown a weekend or two before, but they got it done. And there's just something very powerful and strong about this team at the minute.
Yeah, look, I think Larne, and especially Tiernan Lynch, deserve a lot of credit. There's a lot of soul-searching done at the end of last season. Larne finished 5th last season, and that's nowhere near good enough. I've written about this. I've spoken to several people around the club, and they're honest enough to admit that they should be challenging now. They've been backed well. They've signed good players. They've spent considerable amount of money on Lee bonus. I don't think they're throwing the money about that a lot of people like to say, to be totally honest. But I do think that they've gone about things the right way in the summer, and I would have been quite critical of Tiernan Lynch last season. Anytime I watched Larne, when they weren't winning games, it seemed to be, if plan A doesn't work, let's revert to plan A. And I don't think that suited them. I think there was much more available to them. And I've spoken to Tiernan Lynch about that in recent days. And he admits himself that maybe they did overplay on occasion, and they've had to change things. He's taken that on the chin. He said that was absolutely on him. I think Larne have to learn to play a different way at times. So the lovely football is great when you can do it, but sometimes you just have to dig in. You have to get in people's faces. You have to do all of that. And I think a bit like Cliftonville, I think they're capable of doing all of that. I think Linfield at times have shown both. Glentoran have shown that. And I think if Larne can continue to do that this season, they absolutely will challenge. I'm not going to say they're going to win the league. I don't know if they're there just yet, but I think this will certainly be a much better season for Larne. But anyone you speak to will tell you, look, we're only a couple of months into the season. Yes, things are going well. Yes, we're under the radar a bit, and I think that's what suits them perfectly. It suits Tiernan Lynch's personality to be like that. He would hate the thought that we're spending any minutes talking about Larne. That said, big month coming up. There's some big games that, against the top teams.
You've nailed it there. They're just bubbling underneath. And he had critics, Tiernan Lynch, going into the season, and so far he's answering them. Undefeated. Big result, I thought, that Crusaders Friday night game to get away with the draw. That's a key moment. That Glentoran draw looks even better from the start of the season. Now, I just can't wait to see them against Linfield and them against the Carrick ones obviously coming up this month. Like that is just great games I can't wait to see. And I mentioned Crusaders, they're the team currently sitting in fourth. Impressive win against Linfield. They then follow that up with a win against Ballymena. All's going well. But it doesn't matter how well you're going. Any team that runs into this Carrick team, they're finding it tough. They're falling down. It doesn't matter how many you score. Right now they're scoring more and they're probably wonders. They're the most exciting team in the league for the neutrals, you have to say. Carrick Rangers, what a story this has been for them so far this season. And what a result. 4-3. Incredible.
Sensational from Carrick. And look, I look back on last season and they started really, really well. They picked up a lot of points early in the season, which did them massive favours later in the season when their form dipped. I think they've been shrewd in the transfer market. A lot of people probably looked at Curtis Allen, thought twice about it because of his injury issues at Glentoran, and then he went to Coleraine and had more injury issues, didn't play a lot of games. But we all know Curtis Allen. You put the ball into the box, Curtis Allen will score goals. And he's shown that this season. I think, I was talking to Philip Lowry recently as well after the game on Saturday. And he said that Emmett McGuckin, again, not a player that a lot of people outside of Carrick will be looking at as, a top player. But Philip said to me he was unplayable at times. He was ragdolling people. And when you have that, and so he can stick the ball in the back of the net, plus Curtis has shown down the years what a prolific goal scorer he is, they're always going to give themselves a chance. And they've got a lot of experience in their side. And even the experiences of last season will help those other players. I just think there's a lot to really like about Carrick. I wouldn't get too carried away just yet, in terms of how far they can go this season. Are they capable of repeating the feats of beating the likes of Linfield Crusaders later in the season? Absolutely no doubt about it. I think they have the players to do that. They've got the quality, they've got the know-how, and I think a lot of clubs, especially at Carrick, will be in for a very, very tough day.
I definitely was guilty of throwing a concerned and judgmental eye towards, don't know if that Curtis Allen signing is going to work out. It has. And you know what, Mark? Don't tell me what to do. I'm getting on the board this Carrick bandwagon. 7th place is theirs to lose. And watch out, Crusaders and Coleraine, because I think they're coming for your lunch. They're coming for your 6th place right now. Andy Mitchell's scoring from everywhere. They've got this experience, let's call it, back line, which, yes, is conceding lots of goals, but it doesn't matter. They're scoring goals. Really exciting from Carrick, and particularly when you see the teams below them just can't get out of first or second gear. They keep tripping up. A team, Ballymena was supposed to be challenging for 7th. I don't think that's going to happen now. Glenavon was supposed to be challenging for the top 6. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. They're just fall over their place. They are winless in 4. I don't know if that 1-1 draw against Portadown is great for Portadown or just poor from Glenavon. Maybe it's both, but they have been up and down all season, and right now it just looks as though they're down and they're struggling to get out of it a bit.
Look, it's been a tough season for Glenavon. I was actually surprised when I looked at the league table after last weekend to see just how far down the table they were, because having seen them a few times, I don't think they're playing particularly badly. Now, Gary Hamilton talks a lot about refereeing decisions going against Glenavon, and people are probably sick of hearing that. But I think he has a very valid point. I'll declare my hand. Gary's one of my best mates, so I hear about it quite a lot. But the evidence is there to back it up. And I do think they've had problems in terms of that. But I think the biggest problem for Glenavon this season, and let's just compare them to Carrick, because Carrick have Curtis Allen, that goal scorer. Now, it was a gamble to sign Curtis, but they have a goal scorer. I look at the Glenavon team, and Fitzpatrick has certainly done a great job for Glenavon in recent seasons. Peter Campbell was looking good last season, but I couldn't hang my hat on either of the two of those to score 20 goals this season. I just don't see that happening. And I think that's Glenavon's biggest problem, is putting the ball in the net, because they're doing a lot of things right. But look, it's a challenging time. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But when you're shopping in the market that Glenavon are shopping in, I think you have to have a realistic view on what they're able to achieve. And Glenavon finishing seventh, whether their fans or their chairman or anyone else, or even my mate Gary Hamilton wants to hear it, Glenavon finishing seventh is their version of winning that league, because I don't think they can challenge to finish in the top six.
I think seventh very much is the aim now, and it's almost coming from those, not bad bets, but look, they went big last season on those experienced players, and likes of Waterworth and Co. I've talked about before. It didn't work out. There's now kind of recovering and trying to rebuild. And look, they're getting these young players, the likes of Isaac Bird, coming through. And yes, they are struggling up top, but you talk about a team that's struggling up top, and I raise you Portadown, because that is a team that Paul Doolan has just been saying all season, I've got nobody up top. We don't have that goal scorer. Yet you give away one of your key strikers on the deadline day. I know there was behind the scenes issues. They're not commenting on it there, but you give him away. You've got this collection of strikers. You're not scoring many goals, and you cannot get a penalty against your rivals and then miss it the way Jordan Jenkins did. They're just shooting themselves in the foot. And Portadown are bottom of the league for a reason. They've got 1 point. At least they're off the board. But they had that big game against Dungannon, and they concede within a minute. Like, if you are a Portadown fan, you're tearing your hair out and go, we're out of this top six thing. We had one of the worst preseasons in the league. Our manager is saying we can't score goals because we don't have enough firepower up top. It feels like that was something he could have solved. He didn't.
Yeah, and you said about shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think they've done that, because they probably would have missed if this season's anything to go by so far.
Absolutely.
And I take no joy in saying that. And yes, Paul Doolan has talked about there's no one there to put the ball in the net. I'm sorry, that's on Paul Doolan. He has brought so many players into the club this summer. A lot of players who, any signing is a gamble, but when you're bringing players in from outside of the league, it's an even bigger gamble. And when you're bringing so many players in, you even have to, if you look across in England, you look at what Nottingham Forest have done, bringing in 22 players or whatever it is, and it's not working. I don't know how anyone thought that was going to work anytime soon. But if you're going to do that, you have to bring in some sort of firepower. And I just don't see it at Portadown. I have to say, the first half of the Glenavon game last Friday night, there was a lot to like about Portadown's performance. They did look dangerous. I don't think Glenavon were anywhere near it, which probably helps that. But I think there were things that they can build on. It's not total doom and gloom. But when I look at that Portadown squad, I just don't see where they're going to score goals. And if you're going to be in a relegation dogfight, you're going to need someone to score goals. They don't have that. And if I was a Portadown fan right now, I would be very, very worried.
Yeah, seems like it. Saying that, though, as much as he missed the penalty, it seems as though Jordan Jenkins, at least something, he's being, he scored 1 or 2 goals for Portadown and looked sharper what them had before. They've needed Oisín Connolly to step up, coming from the wing into a striking role, which I believed was his role before he broke into the first team. It looks as though he is stepping up, but that's a lot of weight to put on young shoulders there. And I don't think January can come soon enough for that team, but they are looking sharp. It's a lot better midfield. I watched them a lot last season, but yes, when you're throwing games away against your biggest rivals in Dungannon in the league, that's tough to take. You probably need to win games like that when you have Glenavon on the ropes at times, missing a penalty is grim. But we do have to highlight Dungannon. They're off the bottom. They're clear by 2 points. It seemed that they were getting better against Linfield. They only lost by 1. That's some sort of positive, albeit you're not going to get any points for that. They beat Portadown on their home patch. That's good to get that win up and running. They were crying a bit. I haven't covered this story. I know it's weeks old now, but there was that whole controversy over the Newry goal down at the showgrounds. I think the public jury has said, I described it as cheeky, but totally within the rules. We're talking about where the ball was given back to Newry off a bounce ball, whatever it was given back to Newry, and Dungannon thought it was going to be fired over to them for some reason. I don't know why, but Newry scored and away they went. But Dungannon hopefully are looking up, but did they have anything to complain about in your eyes very quickly when it came to that little situation down in Newry?
No. You could argue it's not within
Case closed.
It's not the spirit of the law, perhaps, what they did. It was certainly within the laws of the game. They did nothing wrong whatsoever. As far as I'm concerned, there was still plenty of time to defend the situation. They switched off. That's on them. That's not on Newry. That's not on the referee. They should have defended the situation much better. I think you're right. It was cheeky. You could argue it was clever. Yeah, look, I can understand Dean Shields' frustration, but I imagine the frustration that came out that night wasn't just about that one incident or that one game.
No. And look, that's a team a bit like Portadown trying to sew everything together between Marin and Convey and Ruddy. They're trying to get going, and they were not loving things when they were winless after multiple games, but they lost to a Newry team who have shone at times, but in turn are probably finding the rhythm that people expected them. Like against the likes of Coleraine and Cliffville, you're not going to be coming out with wins, but 6 goals across both games isn't great, and perhaps it's not going to be as exciting. Once the whole glamour of the start of the season starts to fade away, perhaps maybe Newry could be dragged closer. They've got 5 points on Portadown, which is great, but it's not exactly I think some people talked about Newry as if this was the incredible start. They've got 6 points, that's great, but it's not like they're 9 points clear. They've still got plenty of battling to do.
Yeah, look, I think what we've seen from Newry so far this season is probably what we can expect for the rest of the season. They'll have a couple of standout results that will keep them safe. I don't see them being dragged into a relegation fight. I think they'll certainly bottom 3, bottom 4. I think that's probably where they'll end up. But again, you look at firepower, and they have firepower. They've got creative players. They have experience. Yes, they're new to the league, but they've experienced footballers in there, experienced Irish League footballers as well, even at other clubs. Their standout result, obviously, was the tanking they gave Glenavon, and some clinical finishes that night. Big blow, obviously, John McGovern is out for a while. He picked up an injury a few weeks ago, and that would be a blow to any club. But I like what I see from Newry. I watched them against Linfield, and yep, they lost the game, but there was a lot to like about that performance. I think they do things the right way. I have to say, Darren Mullen is a very impressive guy as well as a very impressive manager. I like the cut of his jib. He's an honest guy. He tells it as it is, and I think he's the sort of manager that a lot of players love playing for. I think they'll be fine this season. I don't think there'll be major issues.
So I think we're all wrapped up with all the fine happenings that occurred while I was giving all of my savings to Mickey Mouse. And now we look back to going, at least for me, back into the cold winter and seeing all these great games that are going to happen this weekend. And we start with a slew of games happening on Friday night. Obviously, at time of recording, we're not across of all the drama that went down with the League Cup stuff. I'm sure it was dramatic or it wasn't, but we'll start with the North Belfast derby over at Solitude. I'm sure if anything's to go by, it's going to be packed out once again there at Solitude. It's got to be on the BBC for us all to enjoy, unless you're at any of the other games. Cracker, this one. How do you see it splitting?
It's a game I can't wait for. It's a game I'm going to on Friday night. I genuinely couldn't call who I think is going to win the game. I've looked at Crusaders a lot this season. Their performance against Linfield, bizarrely after going behind, was sensational. And I think the scoreline ended up flattering Linfield a little bit. So we all know what the Crews have there. But just occasionally, they throw in a result like they did against Dundela or the Carrick game. And that can happen at any stage. And look, they've been unlucky with injuries. Any club would miss Ben Kennedy, who's still going to be out for a while yet. He's a huge loss to them, his creativity and his guile, and, he can get a goal. But then again, they've got Philip Laurie, who can't stop scoring.
He can't stop scoring pretty much exactly the same goal.
And for a while, it was in the same minute, which was even more creepy.
Same minute. It's like at some point in the pitch, everyone seems to forget that this big, tall, whatever he is, 9-foot man is just sitting in the middle of your box. And he always seems to get the ball, and everybody's like, where'd he come from? And then he just pokes it in. These are never strikes. These are just plods along. Fair play to him. I was talking about this a few weeks ago. It feels like he is perhaps in the absolute peak of his career. He's never been as key to a team as he is now, and he's keeping that Crusaders team together. But this Crusaders team is streaky, super streaky, and it comes in patches in games. You even saw it in a game which I thought they should have got something out of, the Friday night at the Oval. They look fantastic. Ross Clark is firing down the wing. He's tripping up wing backs, and they're obviously going to be without Heatley now from the red card against Carrick. And then they just let teams in, and these soft goals happen. A bit like that Linfield goal again. And, they let Larne into it. And I just think missing Ben Kennedy, missing Paul Heatley, and just how, I look at Crusaders and I see they're a team of balance. They've got this core in the midfield, and then it all comes together with Heatley or Clark. And you saw when Ebe had to come on that he didn't give them the type of balance that they needed. And I think that's why you see the likes of Laurie having to come in and make things happen with goals. And look, if Crusaders get it, I think it's probably going to be a smash and grab. But at home, and the form that they're in, I'm banking the hot hand in Cliftonville, and particularly after the Carrick game, it could be a 3-0 win, perhaps, I think, for Cliftonville. And I'm not saying it's because Crusaders are awful, not at all. I just think the game goes, Cliftonville get an early goal, sneak a second while Crusaders are pushing on, and what are they left to do bar just fly down as Cliftonville keep doing and fire men going, and Crusaders are not quite sure what to do then.
It's an embarrassment of riches for Paddy McLaughlin with attacking players. His strikers will score goals. He's getting goals from midfield. Even defenders can score goals with Cliftonville. And my big fear for the Crews is, if you look across the season, I don't think they've had a settled back four. I'm not convinced Stephen knows what his best back four is. And when you're chopping and changing, of course, that hasn't been helped with several niggling injuries with Chris Hegarty, but also, Joshua Robinson got an absolutely horrific injury against Linfield, absolutely horrendous. Thankfully, he's on the mend, and that's great to see. But I would worry for Crusaders defensively. And when you come up against a side like Cliftonville, who are full of confidence, full of goals, full of industry, I just think Cliftonville can beat anyone, and I would probably edge towards Cliftonville on this one. But that said, I have to say, I go back to last season. Cliftonville were obviously sensational last season, and Crusaders went to Solitude and did a number on them in the snow one night. It was an incredible performance from Crusaders, and look, they could absolutely pull that one out of the bag on Friday night. I have no doubt about that. But if I was going to have a bet on it, I would be backing Cliftonville to win.
How many laps of the pitch do you think Stuart King would run if Carrick Rangers were to beat Glentoran? I would say minimum 2. I think he would do 1 when Andy Mitchell scores from his own box. But then when Alan seals it off with 3 seconds to go, I think he would already start running around the pitch in pure delight. I don't think this will be an upset, but what a crazy game this would be if it's anything bar a Glentoran win.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at results and you think it has to be a Glentoran win. But I would have said that about Linfield going to Carrick. I would have said that about Crusaders going to Carrick. So I would never rule out Carrick Rangers. And you're right, Stuart King would love getting a victory in this game. I'm sure Curtis Allen would really love a victory in this game. The Glentoran fans still think a lot of Curtis Allen. I don't think he left the club in a particularly great way. So there's no love lost, let's say. Who knows what can happen again? I look at the Glens this season. It's not only that they've only conceded one goal, they don't look like conceding goals.
No.
And when you have someone of the trickery and the skill and the ability of Conor McMenamin, that's massive for any side. And look, let's be totally honest. Jay Donnelly, probably the most lethal striker in the country, he hasn't started this season.
No.
He hasn't started scoring goals the way we all expected. That will come. I have no doubt about that. So the Glens will only get stronger, in my opinion. And I just see the good news stories around Glentoran will continue.
I think Carrick go into this with absolutely nothing to lose. And if they are to go out of the traps and just say, we're going to throw men forward, because when Glentoran get a grasp of a game, and you saw it in that Crusaders game when they got that goal, they just don't relent, and that's what gives them confidence. I think if I'm Carrick, I just throw the hammer at them, and if they get caught out, so what? You fire the hammer at them and go, let's get an early goal, and if they get it, what happens then? That's what I want to see, but I'm probably going to predict a 2-0 win for Glentoran. Newry doesn't get easy for them. Larne come to them again on Friday. Do Larne play on any other day? And it might be closer than you think, but I would say this is going to be a nice professional win for Larne.
I would agree with you. I wouldn't say it would be a routine victory because I think, like I discussed earlier on with Newry, that do a lot of things that are impressive. I think they will cause Larne problems, but Larne have just been a well-oiled machine this season. Tiernan Lynch is trusted in the processes they put in place. He's very happy with the players he's brought in terms of ability and in terms of attitude. I think they will continue to have a good season. I don't see major problems for them this weekend. They will be tested at times, like I said, but to me, I can't see anything other than a Larne victory.
I think Larne are a team that's built actually for the bigger games, and I know they've had one or two so far this season, but I think when you look at this slightly different and unique, I guess it's a 5-3-2 in my eyes, but it's more of a 3-4-2. That I think that's there to counter the big, 4-3-3s from the likes of Linfield, Glentoran, and Crusaders. And perhaps I thought maybe some of these games against the likes of Newry or something, that's where they're going to slip up because they don't know how to break them down in this situation. But so far, it's proving to be the complete opposite, where they're being able to take the likes of Portadown and all just to the sword. And I think that should be a win against Newry. We go to Saturday, the mere 3, and a get-right game if there ever needs to be for Ballymena and David Jeffrey when they welcome Portadown to the showgrounds. I think this could be tough because Portadown are kind of finding their feet. If they get any sort of result in the League Cup, they'll be buoyed. Doolan's been talking about trying to get this squad to blend. It seems to be getting a bit better, and if Portadown get a goal at any point, you have to think that showgrounds could turn, and that could make it difficult.
Look, I think some of the Ballymena fans have turned. Whilst the board are absolutely backing David Jeffrey, I think some of the fans have turned already, and it's going to take something. One result won't change their opinion. I think it's going to have to be more than that. They will absolutely be expected to beat Portadown given their results this season. But as you say, to borrow a saying from David Jeffrey, baby steps. That's what Portadown are doing. Yes, they've only 1 point on the board, but there was a lot to be encouraged about from the Glenavon game. And if they can take that into this weekend, there's no reason why they can't get a result against Ballymena, because the pressure will be on Ballymena. The pressure will be on David Jeffrey. If they can keep it tight for 60 minutes or something like that, the crowd could turn very quickly. And that's when Portadown could sneak something. That said, we discussed it earlier, I'm just not convinced that Portadown have the players who can put the ball in the net. That's always going to be a worry. But if I was Ballymena, I'd be very concerned about this weekend because it's a no-win game for them in that sense. Everyone expects them to win. If they don't win, They're going to get hammered for it. If they do win, they probably won't get praised because that's what was expected. It's a very, very difficult one for Ballymena. I wouldn't be surprised if this ended in a draw.
I think it is going to be a draw. I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw in the end. I think there's going to be a red card here, and whoever the red card goes for, they'll just hang on, and the other team will be disappointed for not getting the result. But I actually think you're so right. This is not a no-win game, and I'm not going against my draw prediction, which I think could happen, but I think this is a really favourable opportunity for Portadown, because they're just going there thinking, if you can't get a goal within the first 60 minutes, I'll be at Portadown, keep conceding early. It's that advantage Portadown. Corey and Linfield, I've been dying for this game for ages. It's up at the showgrounds. Corey are, again, a bit streaky at the minute results-wise, but as long as they can throttle Linfield, I think they have a chance to win this. This is an even game at this point, I'd say.
Yeah, I think given just the nature of Linfield's season, it gives Coleraine an even greater opportunity. You know, Linfield haven't got into their stride. I don't think anyone could say they have. That said, you know, Robbie McDade's having a tough season in terms of goals, but for as many chances as he missed last week against Dungannon, he's still the guy that got the winner. Robbie will click. He's doing everything right, you know, intelligent runs, bringing people into play. If he can go on a little run of scoring goals, Linfield could start motoring. Coleraine will know that. No one knows what Linfield do better than Winky Murphy and Oran Kearney. They know the Linfield way. I think it's going to be a great game. It's one I'm really looking forward to going to. And listen, if Coleraine play anything like the way they played the first day of the season against Cliftonville, they were so impressive. And Matthew Shevlin, they have a striker banging form, lots of confidence. Lee Lynch got his first goal recently as well, which is a massive thing because I think on his day, he's one of the best players in the league. And I think if it all clicks for Coleraine, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they beat Linfield. That said, I just think Linfield will have a little bit too much when it comes down to it. I think defensively, Linfield will be strong. Their midfield, full of experience, full of know-how. And like I said, if Robbie McDade can start finding the back of the net on a regular basis, you know, I think that goal last week will do him a lot of good. He'll look at that instead of the ones that he actually missed. I fancy the Blues just to edge it, but I don't think it's going to be plain sailing.
That's how I see it. I think it's all going to be in the trenches. It's all going to be Kane and Lynch taking on Miller and Fallon, and I think that's just, it'll be a really fascinating game, but I just think the last 20 minutes, the Blues will turn the screw and get that goal to win out, and Coleraine will be disappointed not to get anything from it. And we end finally with, I think, a big game when it comes to the bottom of the table. Glenavon against Dungannon. It is over at Mornview. That hasn't stopped Dungannon before. It's a bit like that Ballymena Portadown. It's like that light, isn't it? It's like, it is a bit of a no-win game for Glenavon. I guess they would somewhat get away with a draw, but again, tight. If that's 0-0 with 20 minutes to go, there's something more dynamic about that forward line of Dungannon that could just, particularly away from home, they're built to counter. And if Glenavon don't get a real stranglehold of the game, Dungannon are going to flick them on the nose and get something from that game.
I totally agree with you. It's a mirror image of the game that we just spoke about. You know, Glenavon will probably be expected to win the game. And there's no doubt Dungannon have players can hurt any team. I watched them against Cliftonville a while back at Solitude. And I have to say, a lot of what Dungannon did actually really impressed me. A lot of times I've been critical of Dungannon because they pass for the sake of passing. You know, it's a lot of pretty football when there's no need for it. What I watched that day was something slightly different. There was a plan to what they were doing. There was a very clear plan. And I think they could definitely cause Glenavon problems. If everything clicks for Glenavon, I would expect them to win the game. But this season, it hasn't been clicking. And that's the major issue. And I think Glenavon are going to have to be absolutely on their game to get a win. And, you know, it is sitting on the fence, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a draw.
Big time. I think I'm going to favour Dungannon here. I just think they will have something that will spark that could win the game for them. But, Mark, what a comeback from me. I've been dying to have you on the pod. It's brilliant to have you here. Again, I said this to Keith. you know, yourselves in the social club were such a big influence on me. It really inspired me to do this, and it really is a privilege to be chatting football with yourself, as it's I respect your opinion so much, and it's brilliant just in that way. I'm sure other people have thought this guy's amazing as well, no doubt. Where can people find the things you think and the thoughts you say? Where can they find you online?
Well, stuff from the Sun. You can get the Sun any day. I'm writing all sorts of nonsense there. Comment in terms of match reports, news stories, all of the usual sort of stuff. Or on Twitter. There's a lot of stuff on Twitter as well.
Amazing. Mark, it's been a pleasure. I hope we chat to you soon.
Thanks very much, man.